Moonlight exposed human-shaped trees beside the desert highway. Elias slammed his brakes after spotting branches resembling reaching arms. Cold wind carried whispers across the empty wilderness surrounding him. He grabbed his camera and stepped beside the abandoned roadside marker. The sign displayed faded symbols scratched across rusted metal. Something rotten drifted through the dry air beneath desert heat. Earlier that afternoon, Elias heard disturbing rumors inside a remote truck stop. Nervous travelers mentioned a hidden orchard beyond the dunes after sandstorms. Nobody explained further, because terrified silence filled the crowded diner. Elias needed remarkable photographs before losing his struggling travel channel. Debt collectors constantly called while sponsorship offers disappeared during difficult months. The mysterious orchard sounded dangerous, yet danger attracted viewers online. He followed tire tracks, stretching away from the cracked desert highway slowly. Darkness swallowed the horizon while thunder echoed above drifting dunes nearby. Every passing mile increased the terrible feeling beneath Elias's exhausted skin. Eventually, he discovered wooden fences buried beneath drifting desert sand. Dead crows hung upside down beside crumbling irrigation trenches near the entrance. Their dried feathers rattled whenever harsh winds crossed the abandoned orchard. Elias raised his camera after noticing unnatural shapes between the distant trees. Twisted trunks resembled kneeling people frozen beneath invisible suffering somewhere tonight. Several branches curved like human fingers clawing toward the blackened sky. His flashlight revealed old footprints circling nearby trees before disappearing underground. Beside one trunk, Elias discovered children's shoes covered with desert dust. Fresh scratch marks surrounded the tiny footprints despite decades of desert erosion. A strange humming sound echoed throughout the orchard after midnight, finally arrived tonight. Elias searched frantically for machinery, but discovered endless human-shaped trees. Their shadows stretched unnaturally across the sand beneath pale moonlight overhead. While photographing another twisted trunk, Elias noticed horrifying details beneath cracked bark. Suddenly, a human face appeared briefly inside the wood, before vanishing behind splinters. Its hollow mouth seemed frozen within an endless, silent, desperate scream forever. Panicked breathing escaped Elias as nearby branches creaked loudly without movement. His flashlight flickered repeatedly, while distant whispers surrounded the isolated orchard tonight. The voices sounded painfully human, yet impossible words echoed from every direction. Elias stumbled backward, toward his truck while unseen footsteps crunched heavily behind him. He glanced once more toward the orchard before terror overtook his senses. Every tree now faced him directly beneath the burning silver desert moon. Something scratched against Elias's truck long before sunrise finally appeared across the desert. He awoke violently inside the driver's seat, with sweat covering his trembling body. Heavy breathing echoed outside, although the surrounding dunes appeared completely empty afterward. The scratching returned beside his window with slow, deliberate movements across rusted metal. Elias grabbed his flashlight and scanned the darkness beyond the dusty glass nervously. Long drag marks stretched downward like fingernails, scraping desperately against the truck overnight. He stepped outside carefully while cold sand shifted beneath his worn boots, silently. The orchard stood perfectly still beneath fading moonlight beyond the broken wooden fence. Yet several trees appeared closer than they had during the previous night. Elias checked photographs stored inside his camera, while morning light spread across the dunes. Every image showed distorted human shapes hidden among twisted trunks and branches. Some faces appeared different between photographs despite being taken minutes apart yesterday evening. One photograph made his stomach twist with immediate overwhelming terror and confusion deeply. A pale woman's face stared directly toward his camera from inside bark silently. Her eyes looked alive, frightened, and painfully aware of Elias watching her. Ignoring fear completely, Elias entered the orchard again, searching for logical explanations nearby desperately. Dry branches snapped beneath his feet, while silence consumed the desert around him. Even the wind seemed afraid to pass through the cursed orchard today. Deeper inside, he discovered piles of abandoned belongings, scattered beneath several twisted trees. Rusted watches, torn backpacks, cracked eyeglasses, and faded clothing covered the desert ground. Most items appeared weathered, though some looked frighteningly recent and untouched somehow. Near a tall tree resembling a screaming man, Elias noticed fresh blood upon bark. Thick crimson liquid slowly leaked through cracks like sap from wounded flesh underneath. The metallic smell spread heavily across the orchard beneath growing afternoon heat nearby. Suddenly, a weak voice whispered directly behind Elias from somewhere close beside him. He spun around quickly but discovered nothing except endless silent twisted trunks nearby. Then the whisper returned softly, repeating his name from deep within the orchard. Elias followed the voice toward a cluster of tightly packed human-shaped trees cautiously, their branches intertwined like tangled arms trapping invisible bodies beneath hardened desert bark forever. One tree possessed teeth embedded inside cracked wood beside a hollow mouth. A small silver necklace hanging from another branch caught Ilias's immediate terrified attention suddenly. He recognized the necklace from a missing traveler poster inside the roadside diner yesterday. The poster claimed the young woman vanished beside nearby desert highways months earlier. As darkness approached again, Elias realized countless people had entered this orchard before him. None escaped, because the trees themselves carried horrifying remains of missing travelers everywhere. Somewhere deep among those twisted trunks, unseen whispers continued calling his terrified name. A lantern glowed faintly between the trees after darkness swallowed the desert once more. Elias followed the trembling light while whispers circled him through the silent orchard. Every step felt wrong, as though unseen eyes watched from beneath the sand. The lantern belonged to an elderly blind woman standing beside a crooked wooden shack. Torn black fabric covered her thin body, while silver charms dangled from her wrists. Her clouded eyes stared toward Elias, despite obvious blindness beneath the moonlight tonight. "You should have left before sunset," the woman whispered with frightening calmness beside him. Elias demanded answers while gripping his camera tightly against his shaking chest nervously. The old woman simply listened, toward the orchard like someone hearing distant suffering. Behind her shack, hundreds of bones decorated wooden poles, driven deep into desert sand. Wind chimes made from human teeth clattered softly whenever cold air crossed nearby. Elias noticed strange symbols painted across the shack using what resembled dried blood. The woman introduced herself only as Nadira, before leading Elias inside the cramped shack. Dust-covered shelves filled with candles, dead birds, and cracked ceremonial masks everywhere. A terrible smell drifted upward from hidden floorboards beneath the wooden structure constantly. Nadira explained the orchard once belonged to a thriving settlement decades earlier during prosperity. Travelers crossed the desert often because freshwater springs surrounded the fertile land nearby. Families raised orchards there, until unbearable drought slowly poisoned everything around them. Weeks passed without rain while crops died beneath merciless desert heat and starvation everywhere. Children disappeared first after desperate villagers began praying beneath strange moonlit ceremonies outside. Soon entire families vanished during terrifying nights filled with screaming beyond the dunes. According to Nadira, wandering strangers introduced forbidden rituals promising water and survival afterwards secretly. Villagers sacrificed living people beneath the orchard while chanting beside ancient black roots underground. 3 nights later, rain finally arrived alongside something far worse than death. The orchard began growing unnaturally fast, beneath crimson storms flooding the cursed settlement afterward completely. Trees twisted into shapes resembling screaming bodies, trapped beneath stretching bark and branches. Those sacrificed during rituals never truly died inside the growing orchard afterward. Elias accused Nadira of inventing terrifying stories to frighten outsiders away from the desert. The old woman suddenly grabbed his wrist with surprising strength beneath trembling candlelight immediately. Her icy fingers caused unbearable pain spreading through Ilias's arm and shoulder instantly. "You already belong here," Nadira whispered, while tracing dark veins beneath his pale skin. Elias stared horrified as thin black lines crawled slowly beneath his flesh visibly. Tiny splinters pushed outward from his fingertips before retreating back beneath the skin. Outside the shack, branches creaked loudly, while human whispers filled the surrounding orchard again. Nadira extinguished her lantern immediately and locked the wooden door with shaking hands. Something massive moved slowly between the trees, while dozens of trapped voices screamed together outside. A violent pounding shook Nadira's shack, while screams echoed through the surrounding orchard outside. Elias backed away from the trembling door as dust rained from ceiling boards above. Something enormous dragged itself slowly across the desert sand beyond the walls. Nadira pressed trembling fingers against her lips and whispered ancient prayers beneath her breath. The pounding suddenly stopped, leaving only horrible silence surrounding the isolated wooden shack tonight. Elias heard faint breathing outside, deep and wet, like a dying animal nearby. Then came the sound of splintering wood beside the shack's narrow rear window suddenly. Long twisted branches pushed through the opening like skeletal fingers searching blindly through darkness. Their bark appeared soft and pulsing, almost resembling diseased human flesh somehow tonight. Elias grabbed a rusted shovel, while backing toward the front entrance with terror rising. Nadira warned him never to touch the trees after midnight, beneath any circumstance whatsoever. Before Elias answered, another branch smashed violently through the rear wall behind them. The shack trembled violently while human whispers flooded every corner of the cramped room. Elias heard dozens of voices begging desperately for help from somewhere beyond the walls. Among them he recognized the frightened woman from his earlier photographs inside Bark. Ignoring Nadira's warnings completely, Elias burst through the front door into the orchard immediately afterward. Cold moonlight covered endless rows of human-shaped trees swaying beneath heavy desert winds tonight. Yet no wind touched Elias despite branches moving violently around him everywhere. He froze after realizing the orchard's layout had changed since entering the shack earlier. Trees once scattered apart now stood tightly packed, like crowds surrounding trapped prey silently. Narrow pathways twisted endlessly between trunks resembling stretched human bodies and twisted limbs. While moving deeper through the orchard, Elias noticed horrifying movement among nearby branches unexpectedly tonight. Human-shaped trees slowly shifted positions whenever he glanced away for even brief moments nearby. Some bent downward unnaturally, their wooden faces turning toward him with silent awareness. One tree suddenly cracked open beside Elias, with a noise resembling breaking human bones loudly. A pale arm pushed outward from inside the trunk, before disappearing beneath splitting bark. Terrified sobbing echoed afterward, from deep inside the living twisted wood nearby. Elias ran desperately between shifting trees, while roots slithered beneath the desert sand underneath him. Several roots burst upward suddenly, wrapping around his ankles with crushing unnatural strength instantly. He hacked wildly using the rusted shovel until the roots released him completely. Far ahead, moonlight revealed dozens of trees gathered around something hidden within the orchard. Their branches intertwined overhead, like worshippers kneeling before an unseen horrifying god beneath darkness. Low chanting echoed through the grove, although no living people stood nearby tonight. As Elias approached carefully, every tree surrounding him turned, slowly toward his frightened, exhausted body. Hundreds of wooden faces emerged from bark simultaneously beneath the glowing silver desert moon above. Then every mouth opened together and screamed his name across the endless orchard. The screaming followed Elias through the orchard while he stumbled across shifting desert sand desperately. Every twisted tree seemed alive now, their branches stretching toward him through darkness hungrily. Behind him, countless wooden faces continued whispering his name beneath the cold moonlight. Elias crashed through tangled branches before falling beside a massive crater hidden among the trees. Black roots spiraled downward into darkness like veins descending beneath the cursed orchard underground. The air smelled rotten, thick with decay and damp earth beneath the desert. A narrow staircase carved into stone circled downward beside the enormous exposed roots silently. Elias hesitated briefly while distant screams echoed above through the shifting orchard around him. Then the trees began moving closer again, forcing him toward the underground passage below. His flashlight barely pierced the darkness as he descended beneath the desert floor. Slowly afterward, strange symbols covered the stone walls beside dried blood smeared across ancient carvings everywhere. The deeper Elias traveled, the louder human whispering became beneath the underground chamber. Eventually, the staircase opened into a gigantic cavern hidden beneath the orchard completely underground. Hundreds of skeletons surrounded the chamber, arranged carefully in kneeling circles around enormous roots. Some bones appeared ancient, while others still carried rotting flesh upon their surfaces. At the cavern's center stood a monstrous black tree unlike anything Elias had ever witnessed. Its trunk twisted upward like fused human bodies trapped together within endless suffering forever. Thick roots pulsed slowly beneath the ground as though carrying blood through living veins. Human faces constantly shifted beneath the tree's bark, while muffled cries echoed from inside endlessly. Elias stared horrified as eyes opened briefly across the trunk before disappearing beneath splinters. Every face looked conscious, trapped somewhere inside the living black wood forever afterward. Beside the massive tree rested dozens of unfinished human-shaped trunks partially buried beneath tangled roots. Some possessed visible arms, frozen mouths, or half-formed faces emerging through cracked bark painfully. Elias realized with growing terror that transformation inside the orchard happened gradually over several nights. A pile of belongings nearby confirmed his horrifying discovery beyond any remaining doubt inside him. Cameras, watches, wallets, and faded clothing covered the cavern floor beneath drifting dust everywhere. Many items looked modern, proving victims still vanished inside the orchard even recently. Then Ilias noticed movement beside one unfinished tree resting near the black roots, suddenly nearby. A young man's terrified face pushed halfway through soft bark, while tears streamed downward silently. His lips moved weakly before a whisper escaped from the transforming wooden mouth. "Please kill me," the trapped man begged, while branches slowly wrapped around his remaining body. Elias stepped backward in horror as bark spread visibly across the victim's exposed skin. Bones cracked loudly beneath twisting wood, while muffled screams echoed throughout the cavern afterward. Suddenly, thick roots burst upward beneath Elias and wrapped tightly around his trembling legs instantly. His flashlight rolled away while darkness swallowed the underground chamber surrounding him completely afterward. Above him, the monstrous black tree began opening hundreds of human eyes simultaneously. Roots tightened around Elias's legs, while hundreds of human eyes stared from the black tree. The underground chamber trembled violently as muffled screams echoed through the massive cavern endlessly. Thick sap dripped from branches above, like black blood falling onto ancient stone. Elias struggled desperately against the roots, while splinters pierced deeply into his skin painfully. Dark veins spread farther beneath his arms, exactly like Nadira warned before midnight previously. Every heartbeat now carried burning pain through his body, like poison spreading everywhere. The monstrous tree suddenly released a deafening groan resembling thousands of suffering voices combined together. Faces pushed outward from the bark, twisting desperately as though begging for impossible freedom forever. Elias recognized several missing travelers whose posters covered the roadside diner walls recently. One face emerging from the trunk belonged to the young woman wearing the silver necklace. Her hollow eyes locked onto Elias, while tears of black sap streamed from them silently. She mouthed only one word repeatedly before disappearing beneath shifting bark once again. "Burn it," she whispered softly, while the chamber shook harder beneath the cursed orchard underground. Elias glanced toward, fallen lanterns resting beside ancient ritual supplies, near scattered skeletons nearby. Desperate hope surged briefly through him, despite overwhelming terror consuming his exhausted mind. Using trembling hands, Elias pulled a lighter from his jacket pocket beside the roots carefully. He ignited torn cloths soaked with lantern oil before throwing flaming fabric toward nearby branches. Fire exploded instantly across tangled roots, filling the cavern with horrifying screams afterward. The black tree writhed violently, while flames climbed upward through twisting human-shaped trunks above underground. Faces trapped inside bark shrieked endlessly as burning sap sprayed across stone walls nearby. The entire orchard trembled like a living creature dying beneath unbearable agony and rage. Roots loosened around Elias, allowing him to crawl desperately toward the staircase leading upward afterward. Behind him, collapsing branches crushed skeletons while burning wood cracked like breaking human bones. Thick smoke filled the underground chamber as screams followed Ilias through the darkness above. He emerged from the cavern expecting freedom, but the orchard still surrounded him completely afterward. Flames spread across countless trees beneath the night sky, while black smoke covered the moon. Yet despite the inferno, the trees continued moving slowly between drifting desert shadows nearby. Human-shaped trunks stumbled through the fire like burning figures searching desperately for escaping prey outside. Elias ran toward the distant highway, while ash rained heavily across the desert around him. Behind him, hundreds of voices screamed together with unbearable hatred and grief endlessly. Just before reaching his truck, sharp pain exploded suddenly through Ilias's chest and arms violently. He collapsed onto the sand as bark spread rapidly across his skin beneath moonlight, silently. Thin branches burst from his fingertips, while roots pushed downward through his trembling legs. Days later, passing travelers noticed strange smoke rising beyond the forgotten desert highway nearby again. Near the orchard entrance stood a newly grown tree shaped exactly like a screaming man. Twisted wooden fingers clutched a cracked camera forever beneath the silent burning desert sun. Far beyond the dunes, frightened truck drivers continued avoiding the abandoned desert highway afterward nightly. Rumors spread about whispers echoing across sand whenever moonlight touched the hidden orchard. Nobody realized the orchard had survived the fire beneath the desert completely alive.